California has the oldest tree in the world. Anybody know what that is? You might think it was redwood, and some might argue it is the redwood, but it's not. It's not sequoia. Nope, it's not giant sequoia. Yeah, well, she's a cheater. She's a highly educated, certified range manager. But bristlecone pine, which grows in the White Mountains on the east, past the east side of the Sierras, is the oldest tree in the world. Tallest tree in the world. Anybody know what that is?
Sequoia.
Well, that's close. Sequoia is the biggest around. It's the most massive, tallest. I happen to be leaning on one from this species, redwood. So redwood and sequoia are somewhat related. One's called sequoia dendron, and they grow in the Sierras, and they're the most massive. The coast redwood, which is Sequoia sempervirens, so they're all one sequoia dendron, but we call it sequoia. The others, this is redwood, which is Sequoia sempervirens, lives a long time, is the tallest tree in the world, 350, 60 feet up in Redwood National Park, up in Humboldt County, tallest tree in the world. Now, some would argue that redwood is actually the oldest tree in the world. And as we stand here, why do you think these trees are in a circle? Do you think somebody came out here, a forester came out and liked circles and planted those in a circle?
No.
There's a circle there, there's a circle here. You can sort of see a little bit of a circle here. There's one across the way. Why do you think redwoods tend to grow in these circles in these areas?
Because it's hard to get the seeds to revive, and so the ones that are farther apart from others.
Okay, so we're having a variety of hypotheses here. So one hypothesis is they fell down and they were in a circular pattern and they were the ones that survived. One hypothesis. Any others?
They protect each other.
Oh, you're pretty sharp. Where are you from?
Stockton.
Stockton, all right. She said it might have something to do with the roots, and it does have something to do with the roots. What do you think has to do with the roots?
I don't know. I don't remember it because this is when I went to science camp. We learned
Okay, everybody listen up so we can hear.
we learned that it has something to do with the roots, but I don't remember.
Okay, she remembered it has something to do with the roots. They sprout. They sprout from the roots. So redwood trees sprout from the roots. So this area was, even though these are pretty big trees, this has been cut over in the past. When San Francisco was built, after the fires, there were a lot of the San Mateo County area, the trees were cut off. And redwood is really unique in that it's the only conifer that in North America that resprouts. Oak trees sprout, sycamores sprout, cottonwood sprout, hardwood tree, broadleaf trees sprout, but redwood is the only conifer that sprouts. So where all these circles are, there was a great big massive trees that were harvested probably in the early part of the 1900s, probably to replace some of the building in San Francisco. And the other trees, sprouts came out of the circle of the great big tree that was kind of in the middle there and grew up, and now these trees are probably close to 130 years old or so, 120 years old, something like that.
Rick, could you add a little bit more detail? When you talk about sprout, just for those who might not be very familiar with that, can you explain what that is referring to?
Okay, a sprout is, there's buds either on the base of the tree or on the roots themselves. And when they get exposed to sunlight, those buds essentially germinate, or they become active. And this is a sprout right here. And not a very exciting sprout, but it is a sprout. And if this suddenly had sunlight, this sprout, and this sprout, and this sprout, and this sprout would become the new circle to replace this tree if we harvested this tree. So a sprout is just basically a bud that's genetically identical to this tree. It's the same tree, but it just grows back from the root system and what's that?
Almond trees, like Since they put it on the fruit.
Lots and lots of trees do that.
stuff.
Yeah, almond trees do that. Yes. Are you from the valley?
Is
Okay.
that obvious?
Well, you said almonds. So I'm from New Jersey. We always said almonds until I came out here.
Shake the L out of it.
Yeah, shake the hell out of it. That's right. So that's a little bit about redwood. So the reason redwood might actually be older than bristlecone pine is these trees here might be 100 to 130 years old. The tree that was harvested in the middle might have been 1,200 years old. That may have been replaced from a tree that was another 2,000 years old. So redwood tree, that tree there may be from genetic stock that may be 4, 5, 6,000 years old, which puts it up pretty close to the bristlecone pine.
But isn't there a brush, that's even older?
That could be.
They're all clonal.
Yeah, clonal things could be actually much older, as Edie was saying there. So that's a little bit about redwoods. Okay, a little bit about California forests. California has 100 million acres in it. Pretty easy to keep track of percentages because California has almost exactly 100 million acres. 40 million acres of it are classed as forest land. And to be classed as forest land, it has to have land cover that's at least 10% covered by trees. So 40% of California is covered by is considered forest. Of that 40 million acres, about 16 million acres are what we classify as commercial forest land. Pay attention, this might be on your quiz. By commercial forest land, that means it grows fast enough that it grows at least 20 cubic feet per acre per year. So if you think of firewood as it's about 1/4 of a cord of firewood grows on that acre per year. A lot of you probably have seen cords of firewood stacked. If you have 1/4 of a stacked cord of firewood, it grows that much every year. And so then it would be classed as commercial forest land. Of that 16 million acres of commercial forest land, here we are in the West Coast. Who do you think owns forest land, the commercial forest land?
Yes. Forest Service.
Okay, the Forest Service owns a lot of it. So that's owned by the U.S. government. It's managed by the U.S. government. Who else owns commercial forest land?
Private.
Private individuals. Okay, what kind of private individuals? Logging companies, timber companies, yep. Any other thoughts? Ranchers? People that own 20 acres that just, live, maybe work in Silicon Valley and live in the Santa Cruz Mountains. A lot of livestock operators own commercial forest land. So, a little bit of, when you think about the long-term care and conservation of forests, about half of the commercial forest land is owned by the U.S. government, mainly the U.S. Forest Service, or a little bit's owned by the state, but most of it's owned by the U.S. Forest Service, publicly owned land. So about half of the commercial forest land is owned by the public. The other half is owned by private individuals. And of the private individuals that own land, about, 50% is owned by private individuals. I think you all, forest products companies own about 3.5 million acres of the commercial forest land. So some of the companies right here in this area, Big Creek Lumber Company, it's a long owned, really well managed company down in northern part of Santa Cruz County, actually not too far down the road from us here, right near the, do they go to Swanton Pacific this year?
Yeah, they're right next door. They're our neighbors.
Yeah, but do the students go there?
Not this year.
Not this year. Not this
Okay.
year. Right.
Right near the Cal Poly Ranch that this range camp has visited in previous years, right next door is some of the Big Creek Lumber owned land. But further north, there's Mendocino Redwood Company, and those of you who watch Giant games, they advertise on Giants games. Humboldt Redwood Company, they're actually up in Humboldt County. Sierra Pacific Industries, they own about 1.5 million acres in California. They own a little bit of land in the redwood country, but then they own a lot of the Sierras. Collins Pine, those are some of the companies that own. So they own 3.5 million acres of the 8 million acres privately owned. The rest is owned by regular old people that don't have a sawmill. They own trees, and what they do with their land has a lot to do with what happens in the future. So some of those are livestock operators. Some of those are people that bought land as an investment. Some of those are people that live on the land and actively manage the land. Some of them, it's a retirement home that they maybe go to and visit. So there's lots of individuals that own the land. On the federal side, there's lots of laws and regulations that the U.S. Congress passes that govern how forests are managed on public lands. So what are some of the things you think Congress would care about when they were worrying about managing the land you all own as citizens of the U.S.? What are some of the things you think govern forest land management on public lands? What are some things people would care about?
Endangered species.
Endangered species. Okay, so the Endangered Species Act is passed by U.S. Congress, administered by the Environmental Protection Agency. Lots of laws and regulations govern endangered species protection on public lands, also private lands. I'll talk about private lands in a minute. So Endangered Species Act, that's one. What are other things you think the public would care about?
Having access to them.
Yes. Actually, all of our water originates on forest land, either as rainfall or as snowpack. So managing of our forests has a lot to do with how much water comes off the forest and the quality of that water. So all of those kinds of things create laws and regulations that the Forest Service uses when they manage forest land. The Forest Service has lots of different resource professionals that help come up with plans, forest plans, and in California we have 16 national forests, I believe. There's a lot of national forests in California, and on people that work for the Forest Service, certainly foresters, so people like me that went to forestry school, work for the Forest Service, they hire a lot of range managers, so that people go to work for the Forest Service that come up with grazing plans and allotment plans and management of various grass and brush species. There's archaeologists. So a lot of you thought, well, what's an archaeologist care about forest land? Why do you think the Forest Service hires archaeologists? Any thoughts? Seems a little, what's that?
Indians.
Okay.
Sorry.
There's a lot of Native American values on forest land, and there's a lot of important cultural heritage sites. And so any kind of management activity has to pay attention to what those cultural sites are and to make sure that there's attention paid to them. So that's an important resource professional that's involved. Fisheries biologists. So there's, as I mentioned, these water courses that flow through our national forests. A lot of them are fish-bearing streams, and so the Forest Service has resource professionals that work in fisheries. Recreation specialists. Those of you, Mark's on the faculty at Cal Poly. There's a major in recreation, parks and recreation management there. Where I went to college in North Carolina State, we had a parks and recreation management major, and a lot of those people go to work for public agencies to be part of these land management teams to develop recreational aspects, wilderness management.